Hey there, friends. Bo Prosser from the Center for Christian Education. Thanks so much for stopping in and joining with me today. I want to introduce to you my longtime friend, Ruben Swint. Ruben is the newest member of the faculty for the Center for Christian Education. And Ruben, welcome. Thanks for joining in and playing with us in this endeavor. I'm just so excited to introduce you to our folks. So I want to jump in and just get started. You have a tagline uh, for your promotional work, Ruben Swint, the generosity guy. So tell us a little bit about how you came to get that tagline, what that means, and what churches might expect from the generosity guy.
Well, Bo, I'm happy to do that. Thank you for hosting me today. Um, I started working in the area of biblical stewardship and giving more intensely once I was on church staff. And we had a fundraising need, and I got even more involved. And then later, I became a consultant to help churches primarily with capital campaigns. But you were always talking about the fact that you're a consultant or you're a stewardship developer or promoter. And it just seemed to me those were kind of cold words, if you will, that take everybody to the idea of money and transactional giving rather than biblical giving. So I was just one day says, I wonder how the word generosity would be received. I like generosity. I try to be generous in ways even beyond money. And I went on the internet, and is anybody else out there calling themselves the generosity guy? And they weren't. So I grabbed it. I got the URL and I got the copyright for it. And I started introducing myself as Ruben, the generosity guy. And I felt like I got warmer, more receptive response from that standpoint, with that identity, if you will.
Yes, sure. So as a local church pastor, I call you up and say, Ruben, you the generosity guy? And you say, yeah, I am. I said, my question is, Ruben, what can you do for my church?
And my answer is I can do a number of things, but where are you feeling the push right now? Are you struggling with annual giving? Do you need to fund ministries? Do you have a burdensome debt? Do you have older members who are aging out and you're doing more funerals than you are baptisms and you're concerned about future funding? Where's the itch right now for you?
Okay. And are there different techniques depending on need? So if I'm wanting to fund my ministry budget versus do a capital campaign, are there different techniques that you would use in each of those situations?
That's a great question. Techniques, strategies, approaches, whatever you call it, go ahead and let's be sure you have your mission properly defined and that people do understand it. If it's a small project, let's say it's an amount of money that's anywhere from 10% to 50% of your annual budget, you don't really need a big campaign for that. You can handle that internally. If it's annual giving, there's another strategy that deals primarily on income increase rather than capital gifts. If it's a big, large capital campaign to either build new space or retire debt on existing space, then it's a full-blown deal that could take you 3 to 6 months to raise those kind of funds. Endowment giving, I really prefer that to be a programmatic emphasis, kind of like stewardship promotion, uh, so that you don't think you've done it once and it's all going to come flowing in. It's kind of a reminder technique, if you will. So
Yeah,
people are always hearing, not every Sunday, but at least once or twice a year. You can do a lot of good through your estate or your will that will
yeah.
support our mission.
So how'd you get started in being a generosity guy?
That's a great question too. This is a long story. I'll try to keep it short. I was a brand new minister of administration at St. Matthew's Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And 6 months on the job, and our church burns down. The church was set on fire January 10, 1982. And the temperature was down near zero, and there was a 50-mile-an-hour wind blowing down from the northwest. So there were 3 fire companies that answered the call. One of them is spraying water on surrounding houses because our church is now going unbelievably hot, and it's throwing off cinders everywhere. And the water they're spraying that doesn't make it into the inside of the church freezes on the outside walls of the church while the inside's burning. I've seen hell frozen over. Now, I don't know if you want to edit that, but I know what it looks like. And so we needed to build back. We lost our sanctuary, a third of our education space, fellowship hall. We were probably a year away from a building program anyway, so we accelerated that, got into doing 2 capital campaigns. The agency we used at that time was part of the Southern Baptist Convention. Together We Build. We used it twice.
Yeah.
And after the second campaign, I was invited to come on board and be one of their consultants, which I did. And that launched me into this ministry, if you will, of raising funds.
Okay. So, what's the trick? What's the magic bullet for getting blood out of a turnip? How do you ask for money?
Well, there's 2 things. One, my good friend, Gerald Panis, who's the dean of fundraisers. I've read everything Gerald has written and published.
Yes.
He says integrity is the key. You can't do anything without integrity. And once you have learned to fake that, you have got it made. So
great line.
Let me make it a little more practical. You have to practice what you preach. You have to be a giver. You have to be generous. And I do that. My wife and I, when we married, we both came out of families in the church. We'd both been raised to tithe. One of the first decisions we made was we were going to be a tithing family. And we've practiced that all our lives. And if we had chance to give beyond that, we would, and we did. It has to flow out of your own sense of this is the thing we're called to do, whether it's as a good, faithful steward, or if it's someone wanting to live into the generosity of God. You have to know what giving's like. You have to be familiar with the emotions associated with giving because it's an emotional behavior. And I would say that's the key. Number one, you have to be a giver. And then number 2, you have to be honest with people to say, I don't know that God is going to heal you or give you a larger house or a newer car, but I do know that if you decide to give, you're going to feel good about that. And it's going to be a blessing to you as the giver, as well as those who benefit from your gift.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it seems like to me with what you just said, that's just one more duty that we put on the pastor's plate. Is the pastor the main fundraiser of the church?
The pastor has to bless fundraising, if you will. But let me ask you this question. Do we expect the pastor to encourage people to read their Bibles?
Sure.
Do we expect pastors to encourage people to pray?
Sure.
Do we expect pastors to do good works of mercy when people have opportunity?
Absolutely.
Well, I think we expect pastors to encourage people to practice the gospel of good giving. It's another one of those invitations into the spiritual life.
Right.
And I hold it with the same regard as I do Bible study, prayer, and good works.
Now, The average pastor in America talks about giving one time a year. And the average gift to the church is somewhere between 3 and 5%. Tithers are few and far between. Do you see a correlation between that one time a year sermon on giving and the lower giving levels of 3 to 5%?
Well, there could be, but let me say this about the 3 to 5% giving levels. That's been true for decades. You go back, you'll see that same average percent giving. And that hasn't moved very much, that's for sure. The second thing I'll say is most pastors, when they preach on giving, they feel unprepared. They feel sometimes unsure because they didn't receive any in-depth training about stewardship and funds promotion when they were in seminary or whatever formal training they undertook. They've been sent out into the pulpit with one set of expectations from the seminary, and they encounter the governing board, the council, the deacons, the finance committee, who have a totally different set of expectations for how that pastor will behave. So I have a good friend who's one of the best pastors in terms of talking about stewardship and giving and capital campaigns. He does it with a smile. He does it with this sense of freedom, and his church responds magnificently. So I asked him one day, I said, how did you get to be so comfortable talking about money? He says, well, it took me a while, but I got tired of begging and bitching.
And fundraising at its best is neither of those.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Here's the one insight I think most people overlook. This is in terms of clergy, it's in terms of lay people, it may be even in terms of some fundraisers. But the greatest beneficiary of the gift is the giver.
Absolutely.
If we want to raise $10 million, you can raise $10 million, and you can have some people just moaning and groaning because they had to give to make that happen. But then you've got other people who are excited and they are delighted and they can have a part in it. And it's that second individual, I think, that really understands the true spirit of giving, what we're asking people to experience when they give.
Yeah. And hopefully that positive attitude is contagious.
Well, it is. I was at
church.
one church and this lady came up to me and she says, now I know we're keeping gifts confidential. She says, but I got to tell somebody. And so I was safe because I wasn't going to be around very much longer. She told me what she was giving. She told me how she had rearranged her life to do it. And she was excited that she could play for her what was a meaningful and significant part in her church's campaign. Those stories, more than anything else, will encourage people toward that gospel of good giving, I call it.
Mm-hmm. So that gospel of good giving is a wonderful term, and perhaps more relatable in the atmosphere of our country and where we find folks. We are living, many of us are living in a spirit of fear. Many of us are living in a fear of scarcity. And many of us are not going to church and being a part of a church community. So how do we, as fundraisers, preach the message of good giving to this fear and scarcity and non-participation? What's your sermon look like now as opposed to what it used to be?
And we go through this cycle every 4 years.
Yep.
And the fall of this year during election time will be a difficult atmosphere for fundraising, quite frankly. We experience this every 4 years. So I think the first thing is to name fear. Say what we're living through right now are fearful times and we feel afraid, and name it. And then secondly, step back and say, now what's the source of fear? Now for Ruben, the source of fear is ignorance. We don't know.
Yeah.
We're not aware. We
Yeah.
can't predict the future. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You know, and the news media is going to play on that fear because now that they've moved to the internet, they want more clicks. So there's going to be more and more of this. So the first thing to do is name fear and ask yourself, is this really something I should be afraid of? And if the answer is yes, it says, well, what is it that I don't know that I'm fearful of? That's generally what we're afraid of, the unknown. And what do I need to find out?
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid of the economy. I don't know what the economy is going to be like. Well, you can't listen to the political parties describe the economy to you because they're trying to make a case for why they ought to be in charge. What you have to do is look in terms of your own local community, contact the Chamber of Commerce, see if they have some reports out for the local community, because just like politics, all economics is local. And you may have, 20 miles from you, the notice that this big car manufacturer is coming in or a battery manufacturer is coming in. They're going to provide 3,000 jobs. Your economy is going to be fine for a long time.
Yep.
And the only reason you can dismiss the fear is have knowledge.
Now,
One of the greatest sources of knowledge for Christians is the Bible. And what the Bible says about fear is that God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of what? Sound thinking, joyful heart,
power,
and love.
Yeah.
So once we start feeling fearful, we just need to catch ourselves. We need to go find information about the specific thing we don't know, and we need to remember the promises of God. Fear ain't for me.
Yeah.
That's coming from somewhere else. I'm offering you love and peace and power and self-control.
So then how do we attack scarcity?
Well, first thing we've got to do is, I'm looking for the right, determine what is it that's scarce and how is it scarce?
Okay. For most of us, that
Go
answer
ahead.
would be money.
Yes.
I don't have as much money as I used to have. I'm retired. I'm on a limited budget. I'm getting a cut at worship, at work, whatever that might be.
Right.
So my money, I'd love to help you, preacher, but I just don't have the money to do that.
That's right. That's right. Well, in cases where there is a finite supply of the monetary means by which we exchange goods and services, you may have to see if there's not another way to either increase that supply for you, part-time, whatever, or do you need to revamp how you're spending? Now I have a cell phone. It's an adequate cell phone. I'm on one of the major carriers. I like the assurance I have with this cell phone when I travel. But I read where if I would change to another type provider using the same towers, I could cut that cell phone cost in half every month. Maybe I need to do that and not be so tied to an ego thing for me, if you know.
Sure.
There may be ways you can adjust your spending budget that the money you have then becomes sufficient for your need. I think it's perfectly sound biblical to seek out whatever aid is available through government agencies and maybe even through your local church or ministry supported by your church. My concern is not so much that you have money to give to the church. My concern is you have money to live your life and that you're getting proper nutrition. You are warm in your home. You're cool in the hot summers. You have adequate transportation for where you need to go, those kind of things. So that's how I would start talking about scarcity is let's find a way to eliminate it and then maybe redefine it. In terms of giving to the church always needs your prayers. The church always needs your time. And you don't even need to come to the church to give time. If you chose to take care of 5 persons by phone every week and make a weekly phone call to 5 people that you know are worse off than you are, and just touch base with them, be friends with them, listen to them. You don't have to have an answer, but if you have an ear, that's what they're wanting. They want somebody to notice them and to pay attention and to listen. So that's what I would say.
Okay, awesome. So, in regard to the nuns, not the Catholic nuns, but the nuns who have left church, about a third of every congregation is finding themselves with about a third of their congregation not coming back since COVID.
Yes.
So that's a pretty big chunk of folks on a Sunday morning, and some of those are folks who were some good givers in that group. So what do we do about the nuns and those who aren't participating anymore? What's your strategy for those folks?
Well, most of the strategies that I've been practicing for years now have been church-based. So that people have to have a connection with the local church to receive information, to hear sermons, to engage in Bible study. They can even do that by Zoom now or another internet provider. But what if the church had a worship service with the idea of just providing a worship opportunity, whether those people joined the church or not? Right. See, what we are dealing with is kind of the erosion of a model that was developed in the 50s. And the model was a corporate model. And the model was inside the church, here are all the things that are going to happen. We're going to do training and discipleship. We're going to do Bible study. We're going to have prayer focus. We're going to have worship and preaching. We'll have a revival every now and then. And it was all institutionally focused. What we've got to start doing from the pulpit, I think, is we've got to start talking the language of community and movement or cause, if you will. Those are much more appealing to people of all ages, not just to young folk, but especially to young folk. So if you can tell me, Pastor, how this is going to change a life, or if you can give me examples of people who've been directly aided, or if you can point me to a place where I can invest my time and energy and I'm not having to worry about paying debt on a church or building a new church space, then I want to hear about that. But it's got to be movement and community focus, not institutionally focused, which is our model.
Yeah. Well, and the internet gives us a lot more reach to those folks who aren't coming back. Some of them will participate electronically, and some people who we never heard of will hear our message from across the country, even because of the reach of the internet. Some of them will be moved by the needs and the causes that we present. So I tell people all the time, it's not scarcity anymore. It's overabundance, if anything. We got more information than we need at this point, and it's a matter of commitment. So I want to shift gears for just a minute, and let's talk about the messages that we give people And let's start back with the issue of tithing. We still are preaching that message of tithing, which I think more often than not creates guilt and really less giving than more giving. What do you think about that?
That's interesting. With guilt producing less giving. In other words, I can't do that, so why would I even try?
Right, right.
You know, it's kind of an
Yeah,
impossible challenge, if you will.
exactly.
Well, the first place I'd always start is celebrate what we already have. And all the churches I work in have tithers, you know. But I know that if a person wasn't raised in the church, they didn't have parents like I did who tithed and taught me to tithe. If they never went to a church training camp or something like that that dealt with how you organize your finances, it is a tough, tough leap to go from 1 or 2% to 10%. So I appropriated from somewhere this idea of the giving path. And what we really want you to do is be on the path and start on the path at the level you can start at. And we're going to celebrate that because you're on the path. You're a giver. But every year, we're going to give you a chance to see if you want to move a little farther along the path. There are some kind of milestones. You know how you're riding down the highway and you see 173 in a mile, you see 174, kind of those mile markers where there's a similar thing on the giving path. And it's percent of income markers. So you're at 2%. Maybe next year you want to try 2.5%. And you'll give 2.5%. And we'll celebrate that because not only are you on the path, you're moving down the path. And if you will just continue to move down the path as you have opportunity, as God blesses your efforts, you'll arrive to where you have a choice. Do you want to be a 10% tither or not? And that seems to work great for people who are not tithing.
Yeah.
I don't especially like it for tithers because I don't think tithing is really what we're asked to do. I think we're asked to give proportionally. We're
Yeah.
asked to give in proportion to what we have, not what we don't have, and give in proportion cheerfully. So if a person's been tithing for decades, I'd say they're stuck on the path because there's more path.
Not growing. Yeah.
You know, so I would say go to 11% next year. Go to 12 the year after. If you've got the means, the capacity, why not? It's going to benefit
Absolutely.
you, you know.
Yep. Yep. So one of my other favorite sayings that I hear a lot is we're not asking for equal gifts, we're asking for equal sacrifice.
Right.
So how do you respond to that?
People don't like the word sacrifice. They don't respond to that.
Yep.
Now that language came out in the 50s. What had
Yes.
happened in the 40s just preceding? The free world had won the war against Nazism.
Right.
And they did it by banding together and sacrificing. That was a very popular term in the 40s and the early 50s.
Yeah.
And that builder generation brought it into their churches and say, we don't need equal gifts, we need equal sacrifice. We need, what they're really saying is we need equality of effort, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
I don't use the word sacrifice because
Okay.
not that the builders don't get it, but they are fewer and far between than they once were. But for the younger folks, I talk about this. I say not equal gifts because it's not. It's not the same amount, but look for equal joy.
Okay.
Find the gift that has significance and meaning for you, and you are glad to give it.
Well, my other thought is just to turn that phrase around and say, yes, let's just do equal gifts. We need $100,000 and there's 200 of us coming. So that means everybody has this much. Can't do that math in my head, but anyhow, you understand. Everybody's going to pay $500 and we just throw that out across the congregation. That too comes from that builder generation, just billing everyone, not
Yes.
encouraging giving, right?
Yep. 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 That's kind of a personal assessment, if you will. Well, equal giving is the best way in the world to sabotage a major campaign
Yep.
because so many people cannot give the average gift or the equal gift, if you will.
Yep.
And those that can will get off light.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Uh, so if I wanted to invite you to my church or I needed to talk to you, how do I get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website, rubenswint.com, and have contact information there. My email address is rubenswint@gmail.com. And I think you can use either email or go get my phone number off the website and we can have a conversation.
That would be awesome. Thank you for that. So, um, what does it look like when you come? Let's say we're doing a major campaign. I need to raise $2 million, or I think I need to raise $2 million. What does that look like? You come in for 3 to 6 months and live with us, or how does that work?
Yes, used to be campaigns were what is called residential, which means the fundraiser lived with you for months until the money was raised. And the fundraiser made the calls. I think part of the reason it was so long to get it raised was no one wanted to schedule a call from the fundraiser.
Yeah. Yeah, we know why he's calling.
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
it, if done correctly with a spirit of purpose but not feeling rushed, it can be a 5 to 6 month experience. And on the front end, what I want to do is an assessment. Is your congregation ready for a campaign? And I'm going to test the 4 internal factors that I think have more to do with campaign success than others. One, is there consensus around your mission? Do you know who you are and what God's calling you to do? And I don't care if you say the mission statement exactly, that's not what I'm after. I'm asking you in your own language, describe to me the mission of your church. Secondly, is there trust in leadership? And this includes pastor, staff, and lay leaders. What's the trust level? Give me a range. Thirdly, are your programs effective? Are there any programs or ministries that you're doing that need some help? They're not producing what you thought they would or that they used to. And then finally, is the project that you're trying to raise money for, is this necessary? How urgent is this project? Do you need it today? Did you need it yesterday? Or is this something you can wait 2 or 3 years to do? Once I have responses, I generally talk to 20 or 25 people, one-on-one interviews. I keep their name and their comments confidential. I say, I'll share your comment, but not your name.
Right.
And once I have done that, I know whether the campaign's going to be successful or not. I prepare a report, share it with the pastor, staff, key lay leaders, and say, here's what I think you should consider moving forward. Most of the time, Bo, 90% of the time, it's a go because the lay leaders have done a good job of informing the congregation. They've kept in touch and people understand and they know. 10% of the time, there's a little hitch, if you will.
Yeah.
They're not quite ready. And it could be a leadership issue. It could be a mission issue. In fact, I had one church delay 6 months to clarify their mission because in the interviews, people were all over the board. And even a couple of people say, we don't know what our mission is. Well, I said, well, you got to.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of things. But once those are clarified, then you're ready. I've only had out of 180 churches, maybe 5 times I said, you shouldn't do a campaign for this project. It's the wrong project or it's the wrong time, and here what the issues are, and it's going to take you a while to resolve them. So it's rare that I find myself saying that, but the reason I do the assessment is because years ago I did have to say that, and it was in the middle of the campaign, and that's the wrong time to say it.
Not a good time. So,
No.
last question. This may be the hardest question. You don't do this for free.
No.
So what does a pay schedule look like if you're coming to my church to help me raise money?
Okay. That's a conversation that's different for every church in terms of the level of service they're going to need. If you need a number, I'll give you a number. But I will tell you this, I'm trying to do as much of my work remotely as possible.
Yeah.
Number one, to save the church money on the fee.
Mhm.
Number two, to save my body on the wear and tear of travel.
Absolutely.
And so I live in Clarksville, Georgia, which is the northeast corner of Georgia. I have a campaign client in Texas right now. Their budget's $500,000 and their fee is $18,000 inclusive.
Okay. Okay.
And that should be significantly less than what a person showing up on site would charge.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm reducing those costs to myself, and the church is not having to pay them as well.
Okay. So, but basically, I'm paying you for a cafeteria, if you will, of service.
Well,
And
we'll negotiate. Yeah. On
I
the
pay
front
you
end,
based on the services that I buy
yes.
from you.
And you'll get a fixed fee, and there's no add-ons. It's all inclusive. And if
Yeah.
I do an oops and I've got additional costs, well, that's on me. The church doesn't bail me out
Right.
because I didn't plan correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, now I have one more question. Since you've told me all this, can I just go and do this by myself? Do I need the generosity guy to come to my church?
Yes, you can. You can do it yourself. You absolutely can. But there's going to be some instance that occurs or some person that shows up in your office and they're going to have a question and you're going to freeze and you're not going to have an answer.
Yeah.
And then you're going to wish you had somebody to give you those answers.
Yeah.
Invariably, that's going to happen. Now,
Yeah.
you need 3 things to have a good campaign for those of you who want to do it yourself. Number one, you need a case. You need to have a strong rationale for raising money for your project. You need to have a case. Number two, you need leaders who are can-do people, who are proven leaders, who will give their time and energy and influence to making the campaign happen. And then thirdly, you're going to need a plan. Now, that's what I provide primarily, a plan. I make sure you've got a rational case. I help you enlist the kind of folks who serve best as campaign leaders, but I provide a detailed, double-checked, I's dotted, T's crossed plan that you can follow step by step, at the same time maintaining all the flexibility you need to be the church you are. And you don't lose your identity in this. In fact, your identity is enhanced.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I have worked with consultants doing fundraising, and I have done fundraising on my own, and I much prefer to have a partner in the process.
Right.
Good. Not only might there be a church member in my office with a question, there might be a church member in my office with an attitude, and I'd much rather
Comes
have
with
a
a
partner.
question.
Much rather have a partner sharing in that.
Yes.
Man, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's very informational and exciting. Your work has always been stellar, and just have appreciated that through the years and our friendship as well. You'll be hearing more from Ruben. down the road, we will do some more interviews. He plans to do some writing for us as well, and hopefully a couple of other good surprises that will come out of our partnership together. So, Ruben, thanks so much. This has been just delightful.
Thank you, Bo. I've never been on the small screen before, so this is great. I had a
Well, you
wonderful
look
time.
good. You did well, and I'm excited to see what happens down the road.
I am as well.
Thanks, everybody. Bo Prosser, Ruben Swint, the Center for Christian Education. Bo and the Beard, keep on rocking out there.